You're listening to Technomics, connecting you to insights on digital transformation and the marketplace, with your hosts Robin Ituli and Jeremy Nelson. The hosts' opinions are their own. Enjoy the show.
This is maybe my favorite part of the season, and definitely not because this is the last show of the season, but because this episode really ties things together with a lovely bow that shows people like how it gets done, and people who are doing customer engagement right and thinking through it in innovative ways that are changing the face of some of the expectations that are out there, using big data to help drive their business, learning from customers, giving customers new channels to understand their products, to gather customer service, and even to be educated. So talking again with Mike Gaumond and really having the customer engagement season of Technomics come full circle was pretty cool. So without further ado, let's bring back Mike Gaumond, Insight's Senior Vice President of Services. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to see you again, Robin.
Yeah, I'm glad you're back in the studio with us. We've had a lot of conversations since we last left our heroes, all about customer engagement. And, I got to thinking about something that I've been hoping to ask you since our initial conversation, which is, when you sit down to have these customer engagement chit chats with clients, how do you help them to define the business outcomes so they do the right work?
Well, you hit the key there, which is the business outcomes. And in many cases, people are asking questions about what should I be doing with mobile or cloud or IoT or analytics around customer engagement, as opposed to what's the business outcome I'm trying to accomplish. So go back to where we started, looking across that spectrum of the customer engagement that you do and where they might be in that process. Asking questions like, what are we trying to accomplish from a business perspective? Am I trying to build awareness with customers? Am I trying to make the engagement more convenient for them? Am I trying to increase the velocity of sales of a certain product line in certain customer segments? So you start with what you're trying to accomplish from a business perspective and then drive backwards to the solution of what makes sense from a technology perspective.
So we started this whole season by talking about why in the heck customer engagement matters so much. And it's because without customers who are delighted and engaged, you don't really have a sound business at all. But there are so many different facets to this really interesting and evolving area. We've had conversations about the omni-channel experience, Internet of Things, big data, applications, and just the overarching expectations and how to meet them. So we talked about the why, we talked about the what, but I want to talk about how it's actually happening out in the marketplace. And you came with some really great examples of things that we've had a chance to work on. So let's take it all the way back to episode 1, which was really around client experience. And I'd love to hear from you who you think has done some really exciting work in our own universe.
Yeah, there's some great examples of our clients that have done some amazing work in really transforming their customers' experience. And I'll start with one. It's an electronics manufacturer that makes robotic vacuums for your home. So the vacuums that go around and vacuum well, so you don't have to.
Want.
Yeah, great product to have. The challenge they had, back to the business outcome, was that they weren't delivering customer service to the levels that their consumers expected. So they didn't have enough good information about the way their customers' products were performing. So we helped them develop a solution that's really, really interesting. It's really cool. So we actually developed software that sits on that vacuum, and it collects data from the vacuum about performance, like how far it's traveled in your house, and about status, like is the dust filter clogged. Then it uses the Wi-Fi network in your house to connect to the internet, and it securely sends that product status data to our IoT platform that's stored in the cloud. Once we get that data in the cloud, we perform a bunch of analytics on it, and we compare how is that vacuum performing compared to the way it's supposed to, compared to specifications, and how is it performing compared to other vacuums that are out there that we've worked with from our clients and our consumers, so that we can make a decision. Then we make all that data available to the customer service representative at our customer. So now when Ms. Ituli calls customer service and says, I'm having a problem with my vacuum, that customer service representative not only knows your name and your address and how long you've been a client, of course, they know all about you, but now they know all about your vacuum as well. And they have statistics on it, and they know what they should do to fix it. In fact, they can download a software update over the air to the vacuum and fix your problem right there. So this is a great example of a company that has leveraged technology to transform how they're engaging with their customers, in this case, to improve the customer service experience, back to that business outcome.
So that's really interesting stuff, because I love the idea that, these machines are able to help resolve themselves, and that there's an arc, and maybe there's a problem in there that maybe I could fix. That would be nice.
What's cool is it's kind of an example where cloud meets IoT meets analytics, and the T in the IoT and the Internet of Things is actually a vacuum of all things. And yet it's not about the technologies, it's about that customer service experience that they delivered through it.
But it's not just in that consumer goods space where experience really, really matters. I want to take it to another environment that seems like there are a lot of opportunities, and that's in the classroom.
Yeah, in the classroom. So if you think about education, many people don't think about customers in the context of education. But if you're in the education business or industry, the students are your customer. Ultimately, you're delivering a service education to your students. We were working with one of the larger school districts in the United States, a public school district, and they had a goal. They really wanted to transform the learning experience for their students, again, whether they were in or outside of the classroom. And, the traditional learning experience, you give them a textbook and they do lectures and you assign homework and they go home and they do homework. What they wanted to do is really change that completely. So we helped them, and they developed a solution that had a tablet, and the tablet was pre-configured so that it, by the way, didn't allow students to do things they shouldn't be doing, which, young children might want to do, but it was also preloaded with a full digital curriculum. And then they distributed all those tablets to the students in their district. And what they found was pretty profound. First of all, the students were more engaged. Kids that age love leveraging technology, and the fact that they had a tablet to use as part of their actual education experience got them more engaged in the education. The other part is that they always had the current textbook, right? Because the curriculum's digital, you can update it, and you don't have to worry about on the prior release of the Algebra 2 book. Now everybody's got the right book. So a great example where a United States public school system used technology to transform how they're engaging with their students.
I love that there's innovation there and possibility there. My mom is a professor, and so she's always lamenting and rejoicing about technology in her classroom in equal parts. So hearing how much more adoption there is always seems to be a very positive thing, because it's an access that it's got to be learned. Right? Technology is going to be so pervasive in any environment, in any industry, and in any career path that, regardless of the pushback, and trust me, I love the smell of a good book. I think it's very important that we are helping schools get to a place where they can do this kind of engagement and help set their students up for success.
Absolutely. It's going to be a critical skill for them in almost any career that they go into when they finish school.
And I'm sure that on those tablets, there were a lot of applications. And that was really the conversation that we had in the second episode, was talking about apps. I'd love to hear about who we're working on applications with and what customer engagement outcome they were trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And there's some companies doing some great work in this space as well. And one of them is a great client of ours, TD Ameritrade. Probably everybody's familiar with them, a large financial services company. And they had a mobile application for their customers. So again, TD Ameritrade's customer, of course, is the individual investor. And they had an application that allowed them to do some very basic functionality in the mobile world, like checking account statuses. They had a full-featured desktop-type application where you could perform all the different things you wanted. But again, back to where is that customer? They don't only want to be able to make investment decisions when they're sitting at a desktop. They want to be able to make them wherever they are, at work, on the go, at home. So they developed a mobile application that would allow the investor to do things like conduct research on investments, to issue transactions, buy and sell orders, to check order status, to transfer accounts between, or to transfer funds between different accounts, all the kinds of things that an investor would want to be able to do. So by doing this, they provided a huge convenience factor, and in fact, their investors who use this feel like they have more control over their investments, which is huge for an investment type customer. And it's actually increased their customer satisfaction as well.
That's really interesting. And one of the things that you touched on that I think goes all the way back to our first conversation is that 70% figure of your clients and your customers are doing 70 to 75% of their research before they ever get in touch with you. And I love that TD Ameritrade thought about that and included so much research capability inside of the application, because it's not just about the transaction. And that was what their original iteration was, just being able to look at that and, enriching the experience all the way through the experience is, I think, a really important takeaway from that story.
Well, if you think about Ameritrade's history, in many ways, that's what they built that company to do, because the old model in this world was the old stockbroker model, where you had to call a broker to buy or sell a stock or to buy or sell a fund, and you had to interact with them. And Ameritrade was one of the early innovators in the entire space to say, you don't need to interact with a person to make this. You're an informed investor. We're going to give you the tools and the capabilities to enable you to make your own intelligent investor decisions. So it's actually, kind of in many ways putting on steroids what they originally started their purpose to do.
That is a really interesting application. And we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk some more about apps. And now a word from our sponsor. Engaging your customers with modern technology requires a modern platform and infrastructure. Enter Microsoft Azure.
All right, I have to stop you right there, Robin. Is it Azure or Azure?
We had this conversation in season 1, and I believe what we landed on is it is about the color, which is in fact Azure.
Awesome. I'm glad that's finally put to rest.
Although now I've said it so many times, I feel like I'm saying it weird.
It's like spoon.
We digress. The important message that you need to take away from this sponsorship is that with Azure, you can build faster, move quicker, and empower your organization to reach new heights. If you contact an insight specialist, they can help you find out how implementing Azure will open up a new realm of possibility. Applications are a really tricky thing, right? Especially when you're dealing with money. And if you're in a transactional form of any kind, there's always that, split second of hesitation before you hit checkout. But there's a comfort zone inside of an application that feels like it has more control. Do you have any other great examples of applications that we have worked on to provide really great customer experience?
Yeah, let's go back to this whole notion of omnichannel that we talked about in the opening. And, I alluded to the fact that it kind of originated in retail, and it's still alive and well in retail. So we're working with one of the large home furnishing retailers, and they have stores across the United States, and they sell everything from kitchen gadgets to furniture. And what was really interesting is, imagine you were walking in, Robin, and you were just going to go to the kitchen section and buy a few spatulas. And
Probably wouldn't do that because I don't cook, but I am in the market for some lighting in my kitchen.
there you go. You were going to go buy a couple of counter lights for your kitchen. And you grabbed those and you looked up at the checkout line and you saw that there were 6 people with lots of stuff in line ahead of you. And you said, forget it. And you put the lights back and you left the store. So it's a lost sale for them. So what we help them develop is a tablet-based mobile point of sale system so that their store associates could be walking the aisles with you as a customer. They could check inventory if they didn't have the light on the counter that you wanted and find out if they had it in back or if they had it at another store. They could actually take your order. They could process your credit card and give you a receipt and check you out right there in the aisle. Now, there's a lot of sophistication under the covers, right? So this had to tie into their inventory system, right? So I needed to know if I had it or not, or it was in another store. It tied into their point of sale system so that at the end of the day, when they counted the sales, that sale counted. It tied into a third-party payment processor so that when I took your credit card, it was secure. But in the end, at the end of the day, what the application did was improve the shopping experience. So the shopper had an expedited checkout, better customer satisfaction, and they were going to come back again to that store. And probably most interesting, they avoided the lost sale. You did, in fact, buy those counter lights because you didn't have to wait through the line. So it's another great example of how, in this case, a retailer is transforming the experience. Even when they're in the store, they're making it look much more like an online experience than a traditional in-store experience.
You know, I often joke that I just need somebody to help me check out in the aisle, especially when I am shopping with both my kids. The odds that both of them will stay behaved for the duration of the wait in line is like slim and none. And they're great kids. They really are. But they're 4.5 and 1.5. Come on. Like, this is normal. Normal is chaos. And so thank you for helping me with my chaos with your application, right? That's the first thing. But then the other thing is my husband and I were commenting the other day. We actually did go out to a store, and it happened that it was a large home furnishings retailer. And we were looking around at lights. And I said, when was the last time that when did we even walk into a store like this last? And he was like, how old's our daughter? Which is true also. But, you know, what were we going to do at the end of that experience? Probably still go home and make that purchase online.
Yep.
Total showroomers. Absolutely.
But that's what more and more retailers, and they clearly understand that phenomena, but what they want you to do is go online and purchase it from them. Right, so you can look in the store and have it delivered to home. You can look online and pick it up in the store. You can shop in the store and go home and order it online from them. And that gets back to if I do that well and I make it convenient, and of course if I'm fairly priced, you're going to do business with me. If I don't, you're going to come shop in my retail store and then you're going to go home and go online and buy it somewhere else.
And I think that whole omni-channel environment is really something that a lot of people have room to grow on. I think that's a pain point that you hear from a lot of people is that, you know, you maybe have an element in store to help enrich that experience that then doesn't match up to what the online experience is. And that can be very, I wouldn't say disconcerting for a consumer, but it can throw them off. And I would, even in my online shopping escapades, let's just call them escapades. My online shopping escapades, you know, you get a lot of surveys coming up to ask about what that online experience is like, because I think the translation has come so into focus and people are putting a lot of time and energy to try and develop the right applications and functionalities there.
And again, back to our initial discussion in the first episode, it applies to a tremendous variety of industries. So if you think about, again, Insight as a company, right? We're doing a ton of digital marketing. Our customers aren't just talking to our salespeople. They are, of course, talking to our salespeople, but they're looking at third-party sources of information online. They're going to industry analysts like Gartner or IDC, et cetera, to do their homework. They're looking at our website. They're looking at our competitors' websites. So they're engaging in a multitude of ways digitally with other entities, digitally with Insight, and in a human fashion with our teammates. And if we don't do a great job of creating a great experience for our customers while they're doing that, they're going to decide to shop somewhere else. And we don't want them to do that.
Well, and the data is a major part of what is fueling how that can be accomplished. Certainly from a digital marketing perspective, there's a lot of focus on personalization. There's a lot of emphasis on predictive analytics. You know, the opportunities there are, I'm going to go ahead and just call them overwhelming, because the things you can do are just mind-blowing. But getting there is a major investment of time, energy. There are people in our organization who would probably also say blood, sweat, and tears. But that data is a major goldmine for every business, provided that they have the right tools in place. So what have we done in that area?
There's a great example. You talked about using data and predictive analytics and marketing. One of our clients designs and builds motorcycles, and they sell them in retail stores across the United States. And they do a fair amount of marketing, as many companies do. And they weren't thrilled with the return on investment they were getting on their marketing. So they wanted to get a better understanding of what are the factors that are really lead a customer to make a decision to buy a motorcycle or to buy some merchandise, and what factors don't. So we did a project with them, and classic big data and analytics, and we looked at a multitude of factors to try and understand what's really influencing their decision on to purchase or not purchase. And it was very, very interesting, and in some ways not surprising, but a little counterintuitive, that weather was one of the biggest factors. So it turns out, in hindsight, it's blatantly obvious, but if it's cold and rainy out, people don't go test drive a motorcycle. They might, however, buy a leather jacket or some rain gear if they already own a motorcycle. Conversely, if it's bright and sunny out, they might well be in the mood to go test drive a motorcycle.
Unless it's 118 degrees.
Unless it's 118 like it is here right now, then nobody wants to go outside, period. But so what we helped them do then was, once we made that insight through kind of big data and analytics, is we built a real-time marketing engine, if you will, that pulls local weather forecast data and tunes dynamically all of their marketing promotions, so that if it's cold and rainy out, they promote buying rain gear and leather jackets. If it's nice and sunny and not 118, they promote come in and do a test ride. Right? So they're actually tuning in real time their promotions and marketing messages and their digital marketing based on the weather. And again, the goal here is sell more motorcycles and sell more merchandise. Back to what's the business outcome? That's what they're trying to do. But they're doing it by changing how they interact with their customers. It's a great story.
I love that example, but we need to motor out for just a second, and we'll be right back with some more Technomics. When you're like Jeremy and I, and you work in technology, oftentimes you see a news headline and you just start thinking, I wonder how many data centers are required to power that initiative.
All the time. It's so funny. You see traditional headlines come through, and my brain goes into what's underneath that from an IT perspective.
Well, because let's be honest, we live in a day and age where you don't have a lot of opportunity to really dive deep into some of the areas and some of the headlines that come across that are really, really important. And from a technology perspective, where technology is fueling so many of the things behind the breaking news, somebody's got to start telling those stories.
Absolutely. As intriguing and important as the headlines are, for us in the technology space, the solutions that power those decisions is just as important.
So that's what we did. We produced a digital magazine called Technically, because we found that technically there's so much more to discuss when you're talking about things that really matter and impact our daily lives. So if you want to take a deeper dive on the headlines from a technology perspective, really encourage you to subscribe to Technically. We push an issue once a quarter, and it's always going to be relevant and well-researched. You too can subscribe today at technicallymagazine.com. So data is manifesting major customer engagement opportunities, not just in the retail space, but also in places like healthcare to help drive positive public health outcomes.
Absolutely. I mean, healthcare, talk about a data-rich environment. I mean, they're almost inundated with data and can't, in many ways, translate it into information. So there's a really neat example with Steward Healthcare, which is one of the largest healthcare providers in the Northeast. And what Stewart was trying to do was reduce the length of stay in the hospital because, of course, the hospital is the most expensive point of care. So they wanted to reduce the cost of care, but also improve the quality of care at the same time. So they wanted to understand what are the factors that really lead to a longer stay in the hospital. So we helped them do big data analysis on a wide range of variables to understand what's driving the length of stay of a patient in the hospital. And what's really interesting here is it's not what you would typically think of, right? It's not I have a pre-existing condition or I have complications from a procedure or I have an infection after surgery. Those are the things that I would have thought of. Turns out the number one indicator of the length of stay in the hospital is whether or not the patient has a driver's license. And that's because they don't have transportation readily available after they're ready to go home. So now, of course, Stewart didn't say if you don't have a driver's license, you can't come to our hospital. That would be cold-hearted, and they're not cold-hearted. What they said is we're going to work with those patients ahead of time and do things like work with their family or Uber and schedule transportation. So what they've done here through really intelligent application of big data and analytics is reduce the length of stay in the hospital, which reduces the cost of care. But they've also improved the quality of care because it turns out you're more likely to get an infection in a hospital than you are at home, for example, because of all the sick people who congregate in hospitals. So they achieve their objective of actually reducing the cost of care and improving the quality of care. And we help them leverage big data and analytics to do that. So it's a great example of that.
I think that there's a lot of practicality to that. And it kind of goes to one of those early conversations we had about you might find that the outcomes you need to tackle are not necessarily what you originally thought they were. I mean, if you're an administrator in a hospital, you're probably thinking, we got to take a closer look at the kind of infections that are keeping people here. We need to think about, the kind of complications that are extending the phases of recovery. Very unlikely without the assist of big data that you're going to go and look at transportation as being the leading factor that was keeping people in beds.
That's the beauty of facts. Sometimes facts can cloud your theories.
Well, another set of theories that turned out to prove really accurate also had to do with healthcare. And it's another provider who was looking into leveraging wearables, which is a really big trend for a lot of different types of industries. But let's stick with healthcare for a minute and talk about what they did.
Yeah, Partners Health, which is also based in the Northeast, they were actually, this wasn't about in-hospital care. They were conducting a study with patients on the effects of caffeine on health. So they were trying to figure out how can we leverage technology so that when we interact with these patients, we can do that study more effectively and really understand the impact of caffeine on health. So they combined a couple of really interesting things. So we helped them develop a solution where they have a wearable band. Many people are familiar with these, personal wearable bands that you can have. And a couple characteristics, right? It collects biometric data, like pulse and those kinds of things, temperature about the patient. But interestingly, they did this as a study with patients who frequented Starbucks. They integrated the application with the Starbucks application. And they could actually determine through the application whether you were and how many caffeinated beverages you were purchasing at Starbucks. So what they did is then aggregate the personal biometric information along with the amount of caffeinated beverages and then correlated that to the health outcomes to determine if different caffeine levels, higher, lower, or no caffeine, had impact on the overall health of the patient. And what was interesting here is they found that they got much more accurate data from the wearable than you typically get from the patient, where the patient might say, I only had 1 cup of coffee on Tuesday. And they said, well, you bought 4. So did someone else drink the other 3? And then they go, oh, yeah, I just remembered I was really tired on Tuesday, so I did have 4. Right? So it actually, it makes a lot fewer mistakes. So they had better data that actually fed into their analytics engine to help look at the impact of caffeine on health.
So those were some of the main areas that we talked about over the course of this season. Are there any other just really unique stories that come to mind for you of work we've been doing or clients who are really exploring what if?
Yeah, another really neat example is an organic grocery company that we work with. And they set a goal to transform their shoppers' experience, whether they were in or outside of their stores. And what's fascinating is that this started out as a shopping experience goal, and they wanted to transform that experience. So we helped them upgrade the infrastructure across all their stores because their infrastructure wasn't ready to support that. But once that infrastructure was in place, they've done things like within the store, they've launched Apple Pay. They were one of the first in the country to launch Apple Pay so that you could do payment through your smartphone. The other thing that they did in the stores, they created a guest mobile application that was targeted specifically, and they know, Robin, if you go into the store frequently, if there's certain things you really like, and they can help with that. They created, again, to expedite your checkout. Let's say you went in and you just wanted to buy a sandwich at the deli counter, which they have there. In the old world, you would have to take the sandwich to the checkout lane and get behind somebody with 3 shopping carts full of groceries.
Or 2 children.
Or 2 children and 3 shopping carts full of groceries. Now they could do mobile checkout right there. You could, in fact, in a kiosk, order and pay for your deli sandwich, and then when it's ready, they hand it to you and you leave the store. So they transformed the in-store experience, but they also transformed the out-of-store experience. So they leverage an application called Instacart, which allows you to remotely and virtually shop the aisles of your store. So you go down the aisles of your favorite store, you pick the items that you want. Your credit card information is securely stored in there. You make your purchase, and then you tell them, I would like it delivered to my home at between 5 and 6 p.m., or I'm going to stop by your store between 5 and 6 p.m. on the way home from work, and I'm going to just pull up front, and you're going to put it in my trunk, and I'm going to drive away. So they've transformed that experience, whether their shopper is in or outside of the traditional brick and mortar store, and it's having a huge impact. What's really, really interesting is that, and this was a surprise to them, the average size of the shopping cart from their consumers outside of the store is bigger than the average size of the shopping cart of their consumers in the store.
I am not in any way shocked by that.
They were surprised.
Can I tell you why?
No.
In the process of trying to be organized and making a list to go and have an effective grocery shopping experience, you get into the environment and there are a lot of things that pull your attention from getting another bag of coffee, or it's the random little thing that you remembered at the last minute but you didn't write it down on your list and you just said, you'll remember that, Robin. And then you don't. So then it's an inconvenient thing to later realize, well, darn it, I don't have peanut butter now. This is a problem for everyone in my household. If you're able to do it in a virtual setting and put it into a organizing system, so it's not so much a transaction system, it is now an organizing system that ensures that I'm getting everything through the door that I really do need for the week. It also enables something that I find I do not have the capability to do in my own life, which is go to particular stores. I find myself having to maybe go to a store that has maybe more groceries plus other sundries, et cetera, and maybe not getting to the places that have the quality of product that I want, precisely because...
But you're doing it for convenience.
Exactly.
Because you're going to stop once instead of twice or 3 times, but now you don't have to stop.
If I can just slow down and they can chuck these things in my car, I'm doing it.
And to your point on you forgot to buy the peanut butter, why not, this application can build the intelligence that says, here's the kinds of things you buy once a week versus once a month versus once a quarter, and have that there for you.
So it sounds like Instacart is definitely going to be our new thing. So lots of exciting things that are actually happening right now. As you look ahead to the possibilities in customer engagement, what's one thing that you really hope happens?
I hope companies embrace it, but look at it through the lens of the business outcome, not the technology. Again, we're in the technology business, but that's a means to the end. So if the companies go out there and really think about, how do I transform my customer's experience? How do I increase share of wallet? How do I drive profitable growth in different product lines by transforming how I engage with customers? Then the technology questions get pretty easy. But if you start out by asking it the other way around, I think it's going to be a long, confusing journey.
Mike, we're so grateful that you joined us today, and we're really excited to have you back for the next season of Technomics.
Thank you, Robin.
So that's that. That's how it's getting done. That's some of what people are trying to tackle out there.
Oh, I should talk.
Do you have jet lag from traveling to all those client locations?
I do. And that was, I have to say, I was pretty disappointed to miss this particular conversation. Mike Gaumond is one of my favorite people to just sit down and chat with. He just has so many cool things to say, and the way he presents them is amazing. So I was pretty disappointed to not be able to be here in studio with you guys.
Well, you were probably out on site helping to make some of those things a reality, which I'm certain Mike would support.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there was a question on where I should be, but it definitely was disappointing to not be there. But it's great having the opportunity to go out there and kind of participate in some of those things firsthand.
Well, this season has been pretty eye-opening and very relatable because we get to talk about it not only as people who are working in technology and getting to, get our hands dirty in this stuff, but also because every one of us is a consumer, and we can think through it in terms of how we would want to be engaged by technology, how we want big data used to help us find new products, how we could come up with the next great idea through prototyping, and the ways that we can think about design, which is near and dear to me, and how that helps to make the process richer, not just for consumers, but also for businesses, and thinking about what their value is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really boils down to, how do you get a one-on-one experience or feel from an organization that you may never actually have a direct interaction with, person to person, like back in the quote unquote olden days. So, making sure that you still feel like an individual.
Well, it's something that Mike said very early on in today's episode, which is that it's not about the technologies at all. It's about the customer service experience. And I think that is pretty foundational. And it's foundational because the conversation keeps going. The next layer to the Technomics approach is going to be talking about workforce enablement. You want to offer customer service, someone has to be offering it. And the way that technology is shaping how the workforce is reaching customers and acting within the business is being radically changed by the new technologies that are emerging.
Absolutely. And I'm sure as we kind of close with Mr. Gaumond, I wouldn't doubt that he has a few things to say in season 2, as well as some of our other featured guests. So I'm really looking forward to continuing this on into the next chapter, if you will, of the conversations.
When we're talking about technology and we're talking about customers, somebody is providing the engagement with them, and that's the workforce. The workforce plays such a pivotal role in how all of this comes together. They're the front lines, and the way that businesses are arming them with new technologies and new ways of engaging is changing radically. There's a lot to talk about here, which is why that is what season 2 is all about. We hope you will join us and listen to Technomics season 2, Workforce Enablement.
Thanks for listening to Technomics. If you want to find more episodes, you can download the podcast from iTunes, Google, or your favorite podcast provider. And for more stories on intelligent technology, visit insight.com.